In the opulent summer of 1889, as gilded carriages clattered over cobblestone streets and parasols twirled against the Atlantic breeze, the elite of America gathered in Newport, Rhode Island, their jewel-encrusted playground of excess. This was not merely a resort town, it was the stage upon which dynasties paraded their fortunes. Marble palaces rose from manicured lawns like ancient temples to indulgence. Champagne flowed faster than the tides. And within those golden walls, reputations were built and destroyed in the span of a single season. It was a world lit by gaslight and shadow, where manners were razor-sharp, wealth meant immunity, and secrets lay tucked beneath lace gloves and white gloves alike. Among them was a woman who defied every expectation. Her name was Evangeline Marietta Pembroke. She was not born for silence. She was the daughter of Commodore Silas Pembroke, a shipping baron whose fleet controlled much of the Atlantic trade. From her infancy, Evangeline moved through the world like a comet, brilliant, unpredictable, and impossible to ignore. Her beauty was legendary, but it was her mind, quick, dangerous, and unafraid, that made her unforgettable. She debated ministers on theology. She outwitted barons at chess. She quoted Voltaire and dined with suffragettes. At 25, she had turned down 3 marriage proposals, 2 from titled men, 1 from the heir to a tobacco empire, all dismissed with her signature smirk and a sharp-edged, "I don't wish to be someone's property." To the press, she was a muse. To the women of Newport, a fascination. To the men, a threat wrapped in silk, and yet, she thrived in this precarious court of social warfare. She danced at every ball. She hosted salons where painters, poets, and physicists mingled beneath ceiling murals of Roman gods. Her portrait hung in galleries. Her opinions shaped fashion. She was, without question, the crown jewel of Newport's Gilded Age, radiant, untouchable, and daringly modern. But just as the phoenix must burn, Evangeline's flame caught the wrong wind. On the night of August 10, 1889, the Whitmore Mansion, a limestone behemoth that sat like a throne above the cliffs, hosted its most decadent masquerade. Guests arrived in cloaks of sapphire and masks gilded with platinum. The orchestra played until the floorboards trembled. Rumors whispered that the ball was thrown in honor of an engagement, one that would elevate Evangeline from socialite to duchess. She arrived after midnight, her mask, a lacquered phoenix with ruby eyes, her gown, deep crimson, laced with jet-black feathers. Her demeanor, calm, yet electric, as if she knew the world was watching. She danced only once, with a stranger no one recognized, a man with silver buttons and a cane etched with arcane symbols. They moved like mirrors, like fire, like prophecy. Then, in the final hours before dawn, Evangeline disappeared. No servants saw her leave. No carriage was summoned. No footsteps echoed in the marble corridor. Only a crimson feather was found drifting in the fountain, tinged with something that looked disturbingly like blood. There was no ransom. No letter. No body. And in a town that gossiped about the shade of someone's gloves, not a single voice spoke her name again. The Pembrokes abandoned their estate by the end of that week. The Whitmores ceased all public appearances. The press, once intoxicated with Evangeline's every move, published nothing more than a brief column: Socialite Miss E. M. Pembroke missing. Presumed eloped. But the truth, as whispered by housemaids and remembered by old groundskeepers, was far darker. There were signs, candles burned to stubs in the chapel beneath the cliffs, odd symbols etched beneath the floorboards of her dressing room, and a strange letter sent to a Parisian antiquarian in her name a year after her disappearance, signed not as Evangeline, but as the Phoenix Reborn. Some say she fell victim to blackmail. Others claim she uncovered something she was never meant to see, something buried by powerful families with ancient secrets and darker allegiances. What is certain is this: she vanished from the world as boldly as she lived within it. A woman too dangerous to be forgotten and too powerful to be remembered. This is not just a disappearance. It is a buried history. A legend locked behind marble doors. This is the untold story of Evangeline Marietta Pembroke. The disgraced socialite who vanished into silence, and whose shadow still lingers in Newport's salty winds and crumbling corridors. Unraveling her truth means peeling back layers of glamour, scandal, and secrets meant to remain buried. But tonight, we begin. There are names lost to time, names that once commanded every whisper in high society, whose photographs adorned drawing rooms, and whose laughter rang through the marbled halls of America's richest families, before vanishing, not into obscurity, but into legend. One such name was Evangeline Marietta Pembroke, born in the late autumn of 1863, in a red-brick Georgian mansion perched on the east side of Providence. Evangeline entered a world gilded in gold, but burdened with silence. She was the sole heiress of Commodore Silas Pembroke, a man whose ships dominated the transatlantic shipping lanes and whose influence extended into the smoke-filled drawing rooms of both Wall Street and Washington. Silas was not a kind man, nor a tender father. He was a war-hardened tycoon, molded by the profit of gunpowder, opium, and steel. But for his only child, he reserved a curious admiration. She reminded him of himself, bold, calculating, and utterly indifferent to rules. Evangeline was not raised among dolls and embroidery hoops. Instead, she wandered the Pembroke estate's vast libraries, learning French from a Parisian governess and algebra from a retired Prussian officer. By the age of 8, she could recite passages from Ovid's Metamorphoses in Latin. By 12, she could identify and critique the brushstrokes of Titian and Botticelli. By 15, she could navigate the treacherous etiquette of elite dinners as deftly as she could strip and reload a Navy revolver, a trick her father taught her during one especially cold New England winter. She was not like the others. While Newport's other young ladies practiced their waltzes and dreamt of marrying into the Astors or Vanderbilts, Evangeline sat in smoky parlors discussing Darwin, mesmerism, and the growing unrest among working-class women. She flirted with poets, challenged ministers, and spoke too plainly about topics no woman was meant to mention, and yet society adored her. They couldn't help it the time she turned 19. Evangeline was the most photographed debutante on the East Coast. She rode side-saddle through Central Park draped in tailored riding coats dyed indigo blue, stopping traffic and stealing hearts. Her appearances at charity galas caused full-page write-ups in the Boston Herald and the New York Tribune. She sang operatic arias at salons, quoted Seneca by candlelight, and wore gowns stitched by Charles Frederick Worth himself. The House of Worth in Paris, reserved for royalty. To onlookers, she was dazzling. But to those who knew her best, Evangeline was dangerous. Her mind was too sharp. Her tongue too unfiltered. Her interest in spiritualism, in seances, in ghosts, in secret rituals whispered in foreign tongues, unnerved even her closest friends. And yet it drew crowds. Her parlor at Pembroke House hosted the most unconventional minds of the decade: anarchists, feminists, mystics, painters, and disgraced philosophers. Together they discussed things Newport society was desperate to ignore: women's rights, class inequality, forbidden love, and the dark undercurrents of America's so-called progress. She was not simply admired, she was watched. But Evangeline was no fool. She knew the stage upon which she danced was brittle. By the summer of 1889, she had turned down 3 marriage proposals, one from the heir to a Pennsylvania steel fortune, another from a titled British lord, and a third, most scandalous of all, from a biracial French-Algerian architect she met at the Paris World's Fair. When pressed by society matrons about her intentions, she would only smile and say, "Why marry one empire when I cannot live them all?" But her defiance came at a cost. Newport's old guard, long content to let her charm and sparkle, began to shift uncomfortably. The whisper started that she smoked cheroots in private, that she wrote pamphlets attacking marriage as an economic trap, that she corresponded with exiled radicals in Europe. The more her beauty glowed, the more people scrutinized her shadow. One newspaper, the Providence Sentinel, published an anonymous editorial accusing her of corrupting the minds of young women with ideas better left to the French Revolution. Others referred to her salon as the Scarlet Chamber, claiming it was a den of atheism, witchcraft, and treason. Yet, for every insult hurled, another admirer was born. She was nicknamed the Gilded Princess of Rhode Island, not because she was delicate or ornamental, but because she ruled a kingdom of her own making, built not from titles or husbands, but from intellect, wit, and unapologetic courage. She was the future, and it terrified them. Then came the summer of the masquerade. By July of 1889, her name was on every tongue, her future the subject of every letter and whispered conversation. Would she marry? Would she publish her writings under her real name? Would she expose the powerful for the secrets she was rumored to know? She didn't have the chance, because 1 month later, Evangeline Marietta Pembroke vanished without a word, without a trace, leaving behind a crimson gown, a forgotten name, and the echo of a life too brilliant for the world that tried to contain her. It was a night stitched together with candlelight and secrets. A night when Newport, the glittering crown jewel of America's Gilded Age, was bathed in opulence and illusion. Every chandelier glittered like a hanging constellation. Every corridor smelled of perfume, layered in musk, rosewater, jasmine, and something far less definable: ambition. Power. Fear.it was a night where high society came not just to celebrate, but to confess, to conceal, and to conspire. August 10th, 1889, the night of the Whitmore Masquerade Ball, and the last known appearance of Evangeline Marietta Pembroke. The ball itself has become folklore, shrouded in rumor and forbidden memory. But the invitation was where the whispers began. The house that hosted Legends the Whitmore family was old money with new obsessions. Their estate, Halcyon House, stood like a cathedral of power atop a bluff overlooking the sea. With its Gothic turrets, imported Carrara marble balustrades, and windows shaped like eyes, it was a place that both dazzled and unsettled. Inside, it housed relics from Egyptian tombs, Chinese dynasties, and rumored even items from the Library of Nineveh. Mortimer Whitmore, the family patriarch, was more than a railroad baron. He was an alchemist of reputation. He curated not just wealth, but awe. Every summer, his mansion became the beating heart of Newport's secret social life, and every summer ended with one final spectacle: the Whitmore Masquerade. But 1889's gathering was like none before it. This one felt more like a summons than an invitation. The invitations arrived. They appeared on a Monday. No date, no stamp, no courier seen, just a knock, a hush of footsteps, and an envelope left behind. One for each of Newport's most powerful players: dukes, widows, senators, industrialists, painters, mystics. The envelope was unlike any other, made from jet-black parchment that shimmered like obsidian. The wax seal bore the Whitmore crest, a lion devouring a rose. The script, in gold leaf, was flawless, written, many believed, by hand. Inside, the message was short, poetic, and chilling: come cloaked in mystery, speak only in secrets, and dance with the one you fear. There was no RSVP. No further explanation, just a location, a time, and the assurance that this night would be remembered. The whispers began in the days that followed. The invitations ignited a frenzy among Newport's elite. The social register buzzed with speculation. Parlors overflowed with hushed speculation. What did the message mean? Why such secrecy? And who, exactly, had been invited? Because not everyone received a card. Those who didn't, including some of Newport's oldest bloodlines, felt insulted, discarded, forgotten. Those who did knew they had been chosen, but chosen for what? Rumors blossomed in the haze of cigar smoke and perfume. Some said the ball was to mark the engagement of Evangeline Pembroke, the Gilded Princess herself, to a mysterious foreign prince whose name was struck from immigration records. Others whispered it was a spiritual convocation, a ritual gathering of the Theosophical Society, who sought to unite the esoteric teachings of East and West. A few, those closest to the Whitmores, claimed it was something older still, a symbolic reenactment of a forgotten rite. A night when masks hid not just faces, but identities from things watching beyond the veil. Then came the most disturbing theory, that the ball was a test, not of wealth or wit, but of the soul. That something had been summoned. and someone would be taken. The unseen GUESTS days before the event, strange occurrences began to ripple through Newport. A swan was found dead at the edge of Cliff Walk, its feathers arranged in a perfect spiral. The tower bell at St. Helena's rang 13 times at midnight, though no hand pulled the rope. 2 servants at Halcyon House went missing, never to be seen again, and just hours before the masquerade began, a local clairvoyant, Madame Rosa Bellamy, was found unconscious in her parlor, clutching a scrap of the invitation, whispering, "The phoenix dies tonight, but not forever." As the sun fell behind the Atlantic on the evening of August 10th, Halcyon House transformed into a temple of twilight. Torches lined the long gravel drive. The estate's grand entrance was draped in velvet black, and attendants, dressed in robes with mirrored masks, ushered guests into a world of shadow and splendor. The orchestra played a composition written for that night only, a piece titled Requiem for the Dawn. And one by one, the guests arrived, each cloaked in mystery. Some dressed as gods, others as beasts. Some wore no masks at all, daring the world to recognize their real face in the flickering light. But there was one invitation that had yet to be answered. Evangeline Marietta Pembroke, and when she arrived long past the final chime of the estate's bell tower, the entire ballroom turned to watch. But that is where the mystery truly begins. What happened inside Halcyon House that night remains the most whispered story in Newport's long, glittering history, for after the candles had burned low and the music had stopped, one guest never left. The gilded princess was gone, and so were the answers. This was the invitation to a world of whispers, the beginning of the masquerade that became legend. The start of a night where beauty and darkness danced hand in hand. Stay with us as we uncover what happened next in A Dance with the Devil. It was a night drenched in golden light and secrets. August 10th, 1889. The Whitmore estate, perched high above the Atlantic cliffs of Newport, glowed like Olympus summoned to earth. Chandeliers glittered in every ballroom, each a frozen constellation. Music drifted like perfume, mingling with the scent of musky orchids, rosewater, tobacco, and ambition. 1,000 masks smiled, 1,000 lies whispered, and beneath it all pulsed the unshakable sense that something was about to happen. This was the Whitmore masquerade, not a mere party, but a ritual of power cloaked in silk and scandal. Attended by America's ruling class, shipping tycoons, railroad barons, European viscounts, heiresses with diamond-tipped fans, and mystics who claimed to speak with the dead. And then she came. At the stroke of 10, the great tower bell echoing through gardens and domes, a black Victoria carriage pulled to a stop at the grand marble staircase. The horses, white as bone, reared slightly as if spooked by something invisible. Footmen rushed to open the door, and out stepped Evangeline Marietta Pembroke, the gilded princess of Rhode Island, not like a guest, but like an omen. She was born in privilege, daughter to Silas Pembroke, shipping baron and financier of half the opium dens in Shanghai, and raised like a goddess in a world built on old blood and new money. But on this night, she did not resemble the society debutante of old columns. She had transformed. Her gown, spun from imported crimson silk, shimmered black in the moonlight as though stitched from dusk itself. Twining down the bodice and sweeping skirt were golden serpents, hand-embroidered in fine bullion thread. They glinted with red garnet eyes and seemed to writhe with her every movement, but it was her mask that held the night in rapture. A Venetian phoenix, lacquered in hues of fire and obsidian. Its wings curled like flame over her brow, and its beak dipped low between eyes painted like ancient coal. The feathers were not cloth nor lace, but real, obsidian dipped in crushed rubies. Behind the mask, no one could read her expression. But they all felt something cold and ancient stir. Witnesses said she didn't walk, she glided, like something summoned, something once buried, and as she entered the marble foyer, the string quartet missed a note. One chandelier trembled slightly. A servant dropped a tray of crystal glasses. And still, Evangeline said nothing. She began her descent into the hall, not with grace, but with purpose. She spoke in whispers to old senators who flinched at her gaze. She exchanged a single glance with a Russian ambassador who reportedly left the country within a week. She brushed the wrist of a duchess who collapsed from spiritual exhaustion before midnight. And she paused before a cardinal from Boston, his hands clenched white around a rosary. He would not speak for 2 days. What had she said? What had she done? No one knew, but the temperature dropped around her. One maid later swore that the air turned to frost as Evangeline passed, that the candles guttered in their sconces, that the clock hands spun backward for an instant, but such stories were easily dismissed. People drank. They danced. They laughed, because that was the rule at the Whitmore ball. The masks must never slip. Even when you feel something staring back through the eyes of the phoenix, Evangeline moved with impossible precision through each room, never lingering, never smiling. Guests whispered behind gloves and fans. Had she been invited? Was this a protest? Was it a statement, or was it a warning? Because beneath her beauty, behind her elegance, something darker had begun to pulse. A vibration in the floorboards, a tension in the air, and then, just past midnight, she disappeared. Some say they saw her standing in the rose garden alone, beneath a marble statue of Persephone. Others say she walked into the hedge maze, trailing the scent of lavender and ashes. A footman claims he saw her enter the east wing, the one sealed since Mrs. Whitmore's funeral. But by morning, Evangeline Marietta Pembroke was gone. No one saw her leave. No one saw her die.no ransom. No note. No scream, just an empty mask, a scorched phoenix, discovered at dawn beside the estate's reflecting pool. To this day, her fate remains a whispered riddle, a legend woven into Newport's gilded history. Some say she was taken by a cult. Others claim she staged it all, escaping to Europe under a new identity. And a few, the ones who believe in older things, say she was claimed by something summoned that night. Something that had worn a mask far longer than any guest at the ball. But one thing is certain. On August 10, 1889, at the Whitmore Masquerade, something ended. And something else began. And in the firelight shadows, where music turns dissonant and masks crack beneath their smiles, the name Evangeline Marietta Pembroke still echoes. The phoenix still burns. It was August 10th, 1889, a night soaked in secrets, champagne, and something older than memory. Beneath the gilded ceilings of the Whitmore mansion, the masquerade had reached its crescendo. The ballroom pulsed with opulence. Music, rich and strange, flooded through the arched windows and spilled onto the terrace. Gas lamps burned low, and the sea wind carried a scent of salt, perfume, and something else. Something like ashes. Then, it happened. As the orchestra tuned for a new piece, the conductor stepped forward and announced a composition written for that night alone. It was called Nocturne for the Veiled Sun, a waltz no guest had heard before, and none would hear again. And it was then, just as the first chord trembled in the air, that Evangeline Marietta Pembroke reappeared. But she did not enter the ballroom. She stepped out into the night. From the marble terrace overlooking the cliffs, she descended the steps barefoot. Her heels, said to be encrusted with seed pearls and amethyst, were later found abandoned beside a statue of Apollo. The grass below had been freshly trimmed into a spiral-shaped labyrinth, ringed with white roses and bronze sculptures of ancient deities, half-forgotten gods with empty eyes and open mouths. Her crimson gown caught the moonlight and shimmered like garnet flame. The golden serpents embroidered on her dress appeared to slither in motion. The feathers of her Venetian phoenix mask fluttered with each breath of wind. But what gripped the crowd, what froze even the most cynical duke or duchess, was how she moved. She began to dance, alone, her arms unfolded like wings. Her head tilted skyward, exposing her pale throat to the moonlight. She spun in silence at first, as if listening to a rhythm no one else could hear. Then slowly, hypnotically, she synchronized with the orchestra. Each note of the waltz shaped her motion. Her bare feet stepped lightly across the dewy grass, past obsidian fountains and flowering hedges. The music swelled, and she twirled a lone ember in a garden of stone. Guests watching from the terrace whispered, some gasped. She looked like a goddess, one woman later claimed. She looked like death, another contradicted. Some said she was performing an ancient ritual, a pagan invocation. Others insisted she was simply mad. But there was one man who dared to approach her, Count Nikolaus Marcos, an elusive foreign diplomat, suspected by more than one senator of involvement in occult societies stretching from Athens to Vienna. He stepped into the garden, drawn like a moth to flame, but as he neared her, his confidence faltered. He stopped abruptly, placing a hand to his chest. His face turned white. His lips formed words, but only one was clearly heard by the maids standing nearby. Ro, the Greek word for curse. He turned and staggered back to the mansion without a word. Meanwhile, Evangeline continued to dance. The waltz reached its final passage, a sequence of descending notes said to mimic falling stars. As the last note trembled in the air, the garden fell utterly silent. Then, without a word, Evangeline stopped. She slowly looked up at the crowd of guests watching from above, and in that moment, that breathless silence, she reached up and removed her mask. Witnesses would later describe her expression as serene, knowing, strangely triumphant. And then she smiled. A smile too sad for joy, too full of power for sorrow, and in the blink of an eye, she vanished into shadow. No one saw her walk away. No one heard a scream. No one noticed the carriage leave. And despite the hundreds of guests, the dozens of servants, the photographers, and the guards, not a single soul could say with certainty where Evangeline Pembroke had gone. She had been the fire at the center of the masquerade. Now she was a ghost. And so the music ended, and with it, the world of whispers began. To this day, the garden at the Whitmore estate remains untouched. The roses were never replanted. The grass, it is said, refuses to grow in the exact spot where she danced. And under the right moon, some say you can still hear the faint echo of a waltz on the wind, a dance with the devil. When the sun finally rose over the cliffs of Newport on August 11, 1889, it did so with a quiet unease. The sea below the Whitmore mansion looked calm, too calm, like a mirror laid flat beneath the sky. Birds stirred from the garden hedges, but even they did not sing. Inside the mansion, crystal goblets still glittered on windowsills. Perfume hung in the air like ghosts that refused to depart. Guests began to file out of the house, their laughter subdued, their eyes glassy, as if still under some spell. No one, at first, realized anything was wrong, but Evangeline Pembroke was gone. Interior of Whitmore Ballroom, early morning. As the first rays of sunlight streamed through the stained-glass windows, the staff emerged from their quarters, bleary-eyed and disoriented. The ballroom was an ocean of velvet and gilt, discarded fans, half-empty flutes of champagne, and peacock feathers littered every surface. Masquerade masks lay forgotten on chaise lounges like abandoned identities, but no trace of the hostess remained. Not her laugh. Not her perfume. Not her voice. Evangeline had vanished. Soft piano music fades and flashback photos of the night before are made. A young Irish woman named Maura Finn claimed she last saw Evangeline just before midnight, descending the garden steps barefoot, her heels clutched in her hand. Maura waited in the dressing room for her return. She waited an hour, then 2, then 4. By noon the next day, she could wait no longer. She knocked on the doors of the Whitmores. They shrugged. She asked the other staff. Blank stares. No one had seen Evangeline since her solitary midnight dance, and no one seemed concerned. Garden shrouded in mourning. Mist. When the authorities were finally summoned, quietly, without urgency, they found only 3 things of interest. First, her mask. It had been placed carefully atop the bronze statue of Persephone, the queen of the underworld, her stone hands open in eternal welcome. The mask's golden feathers were undamaged, the velvet ribbon still warm from her skin. Second, her shoe. A single crimson slipper, embroidered with garnets and rose silk, was discovered near the edge of the reflecting pool. The water was eerily still, but beneath the surface, lily pads had curled in on themselves, blackened and blistered, as though something had scorched the water from beneath. Third, and most unnerving of all, was what wasn't found. There were no footprints in the DEW. No indentations in the garden path. No disturbed gravel, no carriage tracks. No muddy impressions in the grass. Nothing. As if she had been lifted away by unseen hands. Music swells slightly. Then FADS detectives from Providence arrived later that afternoon. They questioned the staff, the guests who had not yet departed, and even the Whitmore family themselves. Most answered in vague phrases. Some said they never saw her dance at all. Others claimed she was smiling when she left, that she had slipped away into the hedge maze with a foreign gentleman. Some whispered of a silver carriage with no horses, seen rolling into the fog, but none of it could be proven, none of it matched, and no one, not even her own family, pushed for more. Close-up of a wrinkled newspaper front page. Date: August 12, 1889. The Pembrokes, once the toast of Boston society, issued only a single statement through their solicitor: Miss Pembroke has departed. She will not be returning. No reward was offered. No public appeal was made. No posters. No press conference, just silence. Interior of a Victorian police station for the Newport Constabulary. It was a dead end. Without evidence of a crime, there was nothing they could do, and so, within the week, her disappearance was relegated to gossip. Whispers in parlors. Rumors over tea. The newspapers ran a few scandalized headlines, but without fresh details, they moved on. The world had other heiresses to photograph, other parties to attend, but some, a very few, never forgot. Maura Finn in old age, sitting in a parlor, 1932. Decades later, Maura Finn, the maid who last saw Evangeline, gave a rare interview to a little-known local historian. She had never spoken publicly of that night, but as an old woman with little left to lose, she said this: "I don't know where Miss Pembroke went, but she didn't run. She didn't flee. She left on purpose. As if she knew something we didn't. As if that garden had been waiting for her. Like a doorway. Like she had danced herself into another world." The interviewer asked if she believed in spirits. She simply smiled and said, "I believe in Evangeline." Ambient music returns, haunting CHOIR to this day. The mansion stands, though crumbling. The garden remains untouched, surrounded by iron gates. No gardener will tend it. No bride will marry there. And every year on August 10th, the lilies in the reflecting pool blacken at the edges. Some say it's the soil, others say it's the curse, but if you ask the old families of Newport, the ones who remember the Gilded Age, they'll tell you the truth in whispers. She's not dead. She's not missing. She's waiting, and the silence left in her wake? That silence was chosen. It wasn't the silence of sorrow. It was the silence of power. Shot of the garden at night. Full moon reflected in the POL. So if you ever find yourself walking the cliffs of Newport and the wind turns cold, and you hear music, a distant waltz with no source, look to the garden and remember her name: Evangeline Pembroke, the girl who vanished with a smile. The dance ended, the shoe dropped, and the silence still lingers. In the golden twilight of America's Gilded Age, amid the champagne-drenched galas of Newport, Rhode Island, where railroad barons and steel magnates whispered secrets behind feathered fans, one mystery cast a long and lingering shadow: the sudden and unexplained disappearance of Evangeline Pembroke. Heiress. Scandalmaker. Visionary. Vanished without a trace. This is the investigation that never was, because what happened to Evangeline wasn't just a tragedy. It was a cover-up. Gilded grandeur. Hidden SHAME. Evangeline Pembroke was born in 1869. The second daughter of Lord Harold Pembroke, a British nobleman turned American industrialist, and Lady Josephine Ellsworth, heiress to a sugar empire. Raised between London, Paris, and their palatial estate on Bellevue Avenue in Newport, Evangeline was the child of old money and new power, groomed for debutante balls and dynastic marriage, not headlines or heresy. But Evangeline was no ordinary socialite. Fluent in Latin by age 11, fascinated with astronomy, and known to quote Mary Wollstonecraft at dinner parties, she defied expectations. Her beauty made her the subject of society pages. Her intellect made her dangerous. In 1889, when she hosted the famed Midnight Masque at the Pembroke estate, an invitation-only affair for the creme de la creme of East Coast elite, she vanished before dawn. Forever. The SHOE, the statue, and the Silencia housemaid named Elsie was the first to notice. As sunlight cut through the heavy damask curtains of the East Salon, Evangeline's bed lay untouched. Her mask, stitched with pearls, was later found beneath the marble statue of Athena in the garden, beside a single crimson shoe. There were no signs of a break-in. No witnesses. No cries in the night. And yet, Evangeline was gone. The Newport police filed only a single-page report, citing no evidence of foul play. Within days, they closed the case, issuing a statement that she had presumably fled with a foreign lover. It was, on paper, a closed matter, but behind closed doors, whispers grew louder. Rumors in the PRLO are some said Evangeline was pregnant and that the father was a sitting U.S. senator whose name still graces libraries and law schools today. Others claimed she had been inducted into a clandestine feminist order known as the Daughters of Hecate, a group allegedly rooted in pre-Christian rites, spiritualist seances, and ancient women's wisdom shunned by high society. Still more shocking were claims that Evangeline had uncovered dark secrets beneath the chapel of St. Edmund's, a Vanderbilt-funded stone cathedral with stained glass windows imported from Chartres and foundations rumored to be laid atop an older, pagan site. One letter, retrieved decades later in a family trunk, was written in her hand and addressed to her younger sister. It read, "I have seen what lies beneath the marble and the masks. What they worship in Latin is not God. I must act, or others will suffer." The letter was never sent, and her sister refused to speak of it until her death. The family that forgot in the days following her disappearance, the Pembroke family, closed ranks. Their estate was shuttered by the end of the season. Their staff quietly dismissed. Publicly, they mourned. Privately, they erased. Evangeline's name was removed from social registers. Her belongings were burned. Even the famed portrait painted by John Singer Sargent, once displayed in the drawing room, vanished. When asked about it years later, Sargent himself said, "It was returned to the family. What they did with it is no longer my concern." No memorial. No headstone. Just silence. The files that never existed. In 1921, an ambitious young journalist named Arthur Llewellyn tried to investigate the case for the Providence Journal. He found nothing. No police records. No witness interviews. No coroner's reports. He wrote a scathing editorial titled "The Investigation That Never Was," accusing the Newport elite of burying the truth and the body of Evangeline Pembroke. Within weeks, he was fired. His notes were later found in the attic of his niece's home, including transcripts of interviews with former Pembroke servants. One footman claimed to have seen a cloaked figure in the chapel at midnight, whispering in a tongue he did not recognize. Another claimed a guest fell ill that night and was rushed away, never to be seen again. All of them begged not to be named. Ghosts of the Gilded Age. Today, the Pembroke estate is a ruin overtaken by ivy and silence. Paranormal investigators claim strange readings near the Athena statue. Visitors report the faint smell of perfume, and some say a woman in a crimson shoe can be seen walking the garden paths during moonless nights. Historians call it folklore, locals call it a curse, but others, digging deeper, have uncovered strange inscriptions beneath St. Edmund's, passages from forbidden texts, glyphs tied to Enochian magic, and a sealed room beneath the altar, now inaccessible due to structural concerns. Still, no official mention of Evangeline Pembroke has ever been made in the church's ledgers. A name written indust. So, what happened to Evangeline Pembroke? Did she flee a scandal, or did she fall victim to one? Was she silenced for what she uncovered, or for what she became? History has no answers, because history never asked the questions. She was written out, forgotten, buried not in earth, but in silence. But her story remains like a shoe in the garden, like a mask beneath the statue, like a whisper in the chapel. This was the investigation that never was, and perhaps that was the point all along. In the deep folds of history, some stories were never meant to resurface. They slip through the cracks of time, buried under dust, rumor, and denial. But every now and then, the Abyss writes back. This is the story of the Letters from the Abyss, a forgotten manuscript, penned by a vanished woman, whispered about in spiritualist circles, denied by her family, and hunted by collectors. A tale soaked in dread, deception, and something far darker than mere madness. Faded parchment with delicate, looping handwriting. A typewriter clacks in the background. In 1901, at a crumbling pawn shop on the Lower East Side of Manhattan, a young bookseller named Harold Quist made a strange acquisition. A man in a moth-eaten coat sold him a bundle of letters, bound with crimson twine. No name, no explanation. Just a warning: do not read them under moonlight. Curious and skeptical, Quist untied the cord and began to read. Within moments, the air in his shop grew cold. The gas lights flickered, and the letters revealed a name long buried by scandal and sorrow: Evangeline Whitmore. Black and white portrait of a beautiful young woman in Edwardian dress. Her eyes seemed to follow the camera. Evangeline, the heiress of the Whitmore fortune, was last seen in 1889 at a masquerade ball at her family's Newport estate. When the night ended, she was gone, vanished without a trace. Her family dismissed rumors of elopement, suicide, or kidnapping. The press dubbed it the Gilded Disappearance. For 12 years, her name was reduced to an urban legend, her face fading from memory. That is, until the letters surfaced. A flickering candle, a gloved hand turning old pages. A single phrase is highlighted: the mirror beneath the chapel. The letters, over 40 pages in total, began innocently. Mentions of isolation, insomnia, and her sense of being watched by things not of this world. She described voices that called to her from behind the walls. Shadows that didn't belong to anyone in the house. A chapel below the estate, long forgotten and sealed shut, Evangeline claimed that beneath the chapel was a mirror. But not an ordinary one. She called it the abyss. A mirror that reflected not the face of the viewer, but their end. Quick flashes, blurry shadows, stained glass, a black mirror, a face silently screaming. She wrote, "I knelt before it as one would kneel in prayer. But what stared back, it wasn't me. It wore my skin but held a grin too wide for any human mouth. I touched the glass and felt cold teeth." One entry described a voice from the mirror saying, "You were never born. You were borrowed. And now your time is due." Dimly lit archive room. Police sketches and old newspaper clippings. The final letter bore no date. No address. Just a single line. "They said the phoenix burns, but I saw it smile." That line has puzzled historians, theologians, and cryptographers for decades. Was it symbolic? A metaphor for her descent into madness? Or was Evangeline hinting at something far more arcane, something tied to ancient rituals buried beneath the veneer of old money respectability? Photo of Harold Quist. Headline: Rare book dealer found dead in fire weeks after acquiring the letters. Harold Quist died in a mysterious fire. The blaze consumed everything: his collection, his records, his very identity, save for one thing. A single scrap of parchment was found in the ashes, undamaged. It read, "The abyss opens only for those who listen." The letters? Gone. Sold. Stolen. Hidden. No one knows. Their last verified appearance was in 1928, when a Czech occultist named Emil Voracek referenced them in a banned journal entry. He claimed the letters were a key to the gate between veils and that they were being protected by those who never sleep. He was found drowned in a dry riverbed the following spring. Silent church. Flickering candles. Evangeline's face fades in and out. Some say the letters were fiction. Others call them a hoax, a desperate attempt by a forgotten woman to remain remembered. But certain details linger. The chapel did exist. The mirror was real, and the foundation of the Whitmore estate was dug deeper than anyone had known. One paranormal team claimed that seismic scans revealed a cavern beneath the chapel floor, shaped like a spiral. But they abandoned the project. Their lead researcher went blind after spending just one night on site. Visual map of the Whitmore estate. A red X marks a spot titled "Below the Chapel." To this day, no one knows what truly happened to Evangeline Whitmore. Whether her mind fractured, or something darker laid claim to her soul, all we have left are the words scratched in fading ink on brittle parchment, from a woman who stepped too close to the edge and wrote back from the void. This is the story of a chapel that burned, a room that was never meant to be found, and a woman who vanished yet never truly left. Prepare yourself, for what you are about to hear has been silenced for generations. This is the secret room in the chapel. The Fire and the Forgotten Siege PLSD. Edmund's Chapel once stood solemn and proud on the windswept cliffs of Dunwich Hollow, a coastal town now all but erased from maps. Built in 1849, it was a private house of worship, commissioned by the Montclair family, a dynasty of shipping magnates and silent patrons of the arts. It was said that the chapel never welcomed a congregation. No mass was held for the public. No bells ever rang. The building was reserved for invitation-only ceremonies, strange midnight rituals, foreign hymns, and guests cloaked in red. In 1912, a fire gutted the chapel. Official reports blamed faulty gas lighting, but surviving townsfolk recalled something else. They spoke of screams, of shapes moving through the stained glass, of a thick, unnatural smoke that choked even the seagulls mid-flight. No bodies were ever recovered, and so the chapel was left to rot, boarded up, sealed, and forgotten by time. 1994, the Discovery. 82 years later, in 1994, the land was sold to a private real estate firm hoping to convert the ruins into an exclusive bed and breakfast. Restoration crews were brought in. Ivy was stripped away. And beneath centuries of soot and silence, something shifted. While replacing damaged stone beneath the crumbling altar, workers struck wood hard, deliberate panels hidden beneath layers of stone and ash. When pried open, they revealed a staircase. Descending into a velvet-lined chamber untouched by fire, the workers stopped. Cameras were brought in. Historians summoned. What they found changed the way we remember history forever. The chamber and the relics. The chamber was small, no larger than a confessional. But every inch was intentional. Hung neatly on the far wall was a crimson satin gown, richer than blood, and miraculously preserved. Beside it, on a brass mannequin head, was a Venetian phoenix mask, beaked, feathered, and lined with gold leaf, and beneath it all, on a black velvet pillow, lay a golden serpent brooch, with an emerald eye and 3 letters engraved along the coil. E.M.P. Historians were stunned. The initials matched those of Evangeline Montclair Pembroke, the elusive daughter of the Montclair line, last seen alive in 1889 at a masquerade ball held within the chapel's private quarters. She vanished that night. No note. No body. No explanation. All that remained was a lithograph from 1887, a portrait of Evangeline in a crimson gown, wearing the very same phoenix mask and serpent brooch. The likeness was undeniable, and one final detail: the floorboards of the hidden room had been meticulously etched with the Latin phrase, Sanguis et Veritas, blood and truth. Theories and WHISPRS theories flooded in. Some claimed the chapel had been used by a secret society, a mixture of esoteric Christian mysticism and pagan blood rites. Others insisted the Montclairs were involved in a ritualistic cult with roots stretching back to 14th century Venice, where phoenix masks represented eternal rebirth through fire, and some believed the room was Evangeline's tomb, or her sanctuary, a place she fled to, or perhaps where she was entombed alive. The serpent brooch was a clue. The serpent, symbol of knowledge and sin. The phoenix, a rebirth from fire. The crimson gown, a sacrifice, but the most damning theory came from a historian named Dr. Louisa Hargrave. She argued that the room was never a tomb at all, but a chamber of initiation. That Evangeline had not died, but rather ascended into something else. That the fire in 1912 was not an accident, but a ritual gone awry. Her theory was quickly dismissed. 6 weeks later, Dr. Hargrave died in a supposed fall from the 2nd floor of her home. Her notes? Missing. The vanishing of the letters among the relics discovered in the chamber were also a stack of damp, brittle letters, inked in a style dated to the late 19th century. Most were unreadable, but one, according to an assistant archivist, ended with the phrase, "The fire will not kill us, Evangeline. It will birth us anew." The letters were turned over to a rare book dealer in London, who intended to auction them to a private collector. He died 2 weeks later from apparent heart failure while on a train to Marseille. The letters disappeared. No record of their whereabouts has surfaced since. The sealing and the demolition authorities deemed the chamber a safety hazard. It was sealed within days of discovery. The rest of the chapel was demolished in 1996 to make room for a parking lot that never opened. No plaque was placed. No official record made. The land remains empty to this day, overgrown, fenced off, watched by no one, and perhaps everyone, and yet, every now and then, a visitor to Dunwich Hollow claims to see a faint glow beneath the earth where the altar once stood. A red flicker. Like firelight. The legacy of the ROM was Evangeline Montclair Pembroke a victim? A priestess? A prisoner of her own family's twisted rites? We may never know. The brooch, the gown, the mask, all locked away in private hands. The letters lost. The chamber sealed, but the story refuses to die because history, like blood, leaves a stain, and truth finds a way to rise from the ashes. This was the secret room in the chapel, a story of fire, silence, and a legacy buried just beneath the surface. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because there are still stories the world is trying to forget, and we are here to remember them. They say history is written by the victors, but legends are written in whispers, in shadows, in footsteps that echo long after a soul is gone. This is the tale of a woman too bold to be forgotten, too dangerous to be remembered, and far too brilliant to ever truly vanish. Tonight, we step into the storm-soaked streets of 19th-century Newport, into secrets stitched in crimson silk and lies perfumed in lavender. This is the story of Evangeline Marietta Pembroke, the legend that never died. The Gilded Priso in Newport, Rhode Island. Summer of 1889. The Gilded Age was at its decadent height. The coastal town bloomed with champagne, scandal, and silk. Mansions glittered with chandeliers imported from Paris. But beyond the grandeur, there was rot, secrets, power plays. And behind every grand ballroom stood a woman forced to smile through clenched teeth. Evangeline Marietta Pembroke was not one of them, heiress to the Pembroke shipping empire, fluent in 3 languages by the age of 10, and notorious for reading philosophy aloud at supper. Evangeline was adored, feared, and constantly watched. They called her the Crimson Dove, a beauty cloaked in red, known for defying every rule set before her. She rode astride, not side saddle. She refused suitors picked by her family, and when her engagement to Lord Benedict Rowland collapsed, she hosted a masquerade instead of mourning. That masquerade was the last time she was ever seen. He Masquerade and the Storm, August 3rd. 1889. The Whitmore estate was ablaze with torchlight. The waves below the cliffside crashed in rhythm with the violins inside. Guests wore elaborate masks, Venetian, Greco-Roman, some even carved in bone. But one figure outshone them all. Evangeline descended the marble stairs in a flowing crimson gown, a phoenix mask glittering with flame-colored gemstones, and a gold serpent brooch on her collarbone. Witnesses recalled her laughter, bright, mocking, as though she were above it all. At midnight, lightning split the sky. The violins faltered. Candles blew out. And in the chaos that followed, Evangeline vanished. No carriage ever left the gates. No servant saw her depart. No one, not even her maid, saw her again. She had disappeared, as if into smoke. What followed was silence. Deafening, deliberate silence. No public investigation. No obituary. No mourning wreath on the Pembroke gates. Instead, whispers were bought. Papers were paid off. Witnesses were either relocated or, mysteriously, died within the year, but locals remember. They recall seeing cloaked figures near the chapel ruins days after the storm. They recall a strange smell near the cliffs, sweet, burning, like incense and ozone, and they remember the Pembroke seal being removed from every family crest within months. The official story: she eloped to Europe. But no letters came. No sightings. No bank records. Only Silence, and that silence has grown louder with each passing decade. Strange things began to happen in Newport. In 1926, a young girl claimed to see a lady in red dancing in the fog by the chapel's edge. In 1954, a fisherman discovered a red silk shoe on the shore, dry, pristine, and without a trace of sand. In 1978, an artist sketched a woman he'd seen walking barefoot along the beach. When he showed it at a gallery, a descendant of the Pembroke family whispered, "That's her. That's Evangeline." The legend grew. They say she appears before major storms, always alone, always dressed in red. Some believe she was murdered. Others think she became part of a secret society, that the masquerade was not a party, but a ritual. A few even claim she was never human at all. That Evangeline was a vessel for something older, something the Pembrokes tried to control, and failed. Bloodline and revenge. In the 1990s, genealogists traced the Pembroke line and found something chilling. The family ceased to exist. Every known male heir had died childless. Every daughter vanished, disinherited, or presumed insane. The final matriarch, Evangeline's cousin Marguerite, burned every remaining family record before disappearing into a convent in northern France. She left behind a single note: "We tried to bury the fire, but it walks still." The legend today to this day, Newport locals whisper of the woman in red. She walks the cliffs when the fog is thickest. She lingers in the perfume of night-blooming jasmine. Some say she speaks to those who are lost, offering not comfort, but warning. The legend lives in postcards, in paintings, in songs sung by children who don't even know the name Evangeline, but still hum the melody she once played on the Whitmore piano. They say if you stand on the edge of the cliffs at sunset, just as the wind shifts, you'll hear footsteps behind you, and a voice, soft and amused, will whisper, "I never left." The power of Memory. Evangeline Marietta Pembroke was not a woman history wanted to remember. She was too outspoken, too free, too unwilling to be married off, silenced, or molded. They erased her, but she refused to stay gone, because a woman like her, a woman of silk and fire, of knowledge and rebellion, does not die quietly. She becomes legend, and legends, my friends, never die. Somber music builds, fading into the sound of waves and distant thunder. If you believe her story deserves to be remembered, share this video, comment with your theories, and most of all, never forget the woman who walked away from silence. This was the untold story of the disgraced socialite who disappeared, Newport 1889. This was the legend that never died. Until next time, keep your lantern lit, because some ghosts don't haunt, they simply wait to be seen again.